I've been very honoured to be invited by Kelly to give a guest presentation today. My name is Rita Summers. I live in Tasmania and I love to create. I could probably call myself an eco-artist. I love to use natural fibres. I do natural dyeing and printing. I also do lots of stitching, and I do like to work with both paper and cloth. So today I'm going to share with you some techniques that I've been using in a journal that I've been making. And I'll show you a couple of journals that I've just finished also, just briefly. But it's more about the process of layouts and adding stitch to make either a journal page or a standalone artwork. So I hope it gives you lots of ideas. I hope you also will like this video and also give Kelly some love by subscribing to her channel if you haven't done so already. And if you feel like wandering over to my channel, it's called Gone Rustic, which is the name of my business. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. Just to show you where I'm coming from, here are two journals that I've recently completed. I would call them art journals. They both express things that I feel quite deeply about, but I'm trying to do it in a visual way so that it can make people think, but also be enjoyable on a visual level. I often combine paper and fabric. So I'll just show you this one first. As you can see, the cover combines quite a few things. We've got paper, sticks, a feather, some fabric which I've eco-printed, some recycled papers, and this paper has also been eco-printed, stamped text, and so on. And this is the way I work. I'm not really limited by my materials. I use what I have, which is also Kelly's approach, which I really like. And often things come together that you don't expect if you use what you have and keep your eyes open for interesting ingredients, I guess you could say, for your art journaling. I often, as I said, combine fabric and paper. So when we open this book, this is actually canvas, which I've eco-printed. Then I've got paper with tea bag, found labels from embroidery thread, sheet music, and so on. And the common thing that runs through everything is stitch. So I always incorporate stitching in some form in my work, very rarely. And in fact, I can't even think of any times when I've left it out. So stitching is a very important part of what I do. And disparate materials can actually work really well together, especially if you're working on a theme. The other book that I wanted to just show you a little bit of is this one. And we'll probably base what we're going to do more on this one for the purposes of this video. I've used my own eco-printed papers, and I've also used some sheet music, as you can see here. And I've layered them, usually by gluing and then adding stitch. And the stitch not only helps to embellish the page, but it also helps to secure it. I use various types of glue, but my main go-to would be a glue stick. So I thought what we would do was just do a couple of pages so you can see my process, and then you can take it from there. And also at the end of the video, I'll show you some ways to incorporate them into either a book or an artwork. We all get junk mail, don't we? Even if we have a no junk mail notice on our letterbox, we tend to wind up with some. We have a post box at our local post office, and we don't get a lot of junk mail, but I do get some publicity material from groups that I support. And there is a conservation group that I do support, and they send me material, and usually I read it and then I'll either recycle it or use it for lighting the fire. This journal, Where Water Thrives, arose from a mail out about the importance of wetlands and the conservation of wetlands, and that instead of being burned or recycled ended up becoming this book. So you may have junk mail or publicity material that you receive which could inspire a journal or an art page, or an art page or a whole journal. This was some material from the same group that I received recently, and so I thought I might start a second work following on from the one I've just shown you. And this one doesn't have as many visuals, so there's a lot of text, but I think I can work with that. There are some pictures which I do want to use, and I've started to tear and cut some of the things from this material. So some of them I've just cut out, and this one I had already cut a little bit away from it for something else. But I think that this would still be useful whether I tear it further or cut it further. And the same with this one. It also has a bit of a map on the other side, so I could use either side really. Text is also really useful for adding interest to your pages, so I've torn those, and then these I've cut with my scissors. Then you have some pieces which are left over once you've torn out the bits you want. Don't throw these away, because they often can be incorporated into your page. And again, you can use sometimes either side. Here are some that I've torn, some images from this publicity material, and I still have quite a bit left that I can use. Now, because there's a lot of text, I've been trying to think of ways that I can use that further as part of the layout. So as we go along, I'll show you what I come up with. Here are some more leftover pieces. And even the letter that accompanies the publicity material can be useful for phrases, backgrounds, and so on. There's a little leaf piece that I can use as well. So this is about soil health and seed resilience. And because that's a subject that's also close to my heart, I thought I would do something with it. As I mentioned, one of the things that I like to use is old sheet music. I find this in thrift shops, or opportunity shops as we call them here in Australia. And this one, even though it's vintage, the paper is reasonably robust, so it will take gluing and stitching with no problem. But if your sheet music that you use is a bit fragile, you may need to use a double layer or back it with something to give it strength. I usually just use an old bone-handled butter knife to give a nice soft edge to the pages when I cut them to size. So this is one that I've cut to size already, and then without measuring, I just place this next to the one that I've already done, and then I make a little mark with my fingernail and give it a little bend, and then I use that as my guide for cutting. So I'm just going to fold it, lining up the edges here so that it's straight. You can't always rely on the text or the sheet music because it may not have been printed straight on the page, but you may have to fudge it a little bit if that's the case. Fortunately, it is on this one, so it won't look like I've cut it crooked even when it's straight. And I don't throw away these small pieces. In fact, the other pieces that I've trimmed off, I'm keeping those too because they can be really useful to incorporate in the collage. So now I have 2 pages, almost. I've still got to trim the side to make this other one the same size. So I'll do that in a similar way. I'll just put them next to each other, line them up, and then make a little crease. And I don't worry too much if the pages are not totally even. And sometimes, of course, you can deliberately make pages uneven, and that can really add to the interest in your book. But for the purposes of this one, they're going to be near enough to the same size. So there I go, cutting it with this knife. If your paper's too thick and it won't really cut very well with this method, then you can try maybe a carving knife that has a serrated edge, and otherwise you might need to cut it with a rotary cutter or with a paper cutting tool. So there are 2 of the music sheets, and I'm also going to incorporate some of my eco-printed papers. This is a piece of my eco-printed paper. It's a watercolour paper, so it's reasonably robust, and I'm going to use this for one of the pages because it's not big enough to do 2. unless I make them a different size, which I could do, but I won't be for this exercise. If you don't do eco-printing and would like to use eco-printed papers, I do occasionally sell them at my online shop, which is called gonerustic.com. I don't have any at the moment, but I do plan to do some more soon, some to sell and some for my own use. So if you'd like to visit there, you might be able to get hold of some if it's not something that you want to do yourself. But of course you can use any kind of paper. You don't have to use the kinds of paper that I'm using. It's just that these are the papers that I'm wanting to use for this particular project. So again, I've got my music sheet and it's a certain size, which I would like to use. And there's a certain part of this eco-printed sheet that I would like to incorporate. So I'm going to lay it down where I think it's going to have the most impact. And then I'll do the same as before. I'll make a little crease by folding it, and then I'll cut it with this knife. So I'll do it on both sides. Luckily it's the same width, so I don't have to alter the width at all. But you can use any papers that you like, as long as they are reasonably robust. You don't want something that's going to fall apart when you look at it. So just folded that up, and then I'll do this with the butter knife. Because this is a thicker paper, this is a little bit more difficult, so you just have to hold it very firmly and just take your time. And make sure it doesn't slip. And there we go, and I've got that scrappy bit, which will be very useful. And I have a bag that I save these in, and I use them along with the other pieces that I showed you, the publicity material pieces. And the other side. And again, when you fold it, make sure you line up the edges, presuming that they're straight, of course, and I know these are because I cut them myself. And give it a good crease. I just use my fingers, but if you want it to do it really well, you can use a bone folder or even the handle of this knife, because that's made out of bone, so I could actually go like that. Often that makes it easier to cut because it weakens the fibres. So if you're having difficulty cutting, that's something else you can do to make it easier. And then cut it as before. And again, I've got another nice piece to use. So I now have 3 pages for my new book, which might be a book or it might be something else. I have my eco-printed paper and I have 2 sheets of music paper. And often what I do is I alternate them. So I don't always do it that way, but I do often alternate them. And I think in my wetlands journal, I alternated them 2 by 2. So it's up to you how you like to do it. If you wanted to use a different page each time, that's perfectly fine also. But I do find that this gives my project continuity. So now it's time to start trying out some layouts. One of the things I do is I save my tea bags. What I do is I dry them, then I empty them, and then I iron them. So I have a whole box full of used tea bag paper, and it's often a really great background and sometimes even a foreground, because you can also have it as a slightly translucent layer on your page. So this one is one that I've torn already, and I've just done a sample layout here, which I'm actually quite liking, and I could maybe incorporate some tea bag. So I'm just going to move them, trying to remember, of course, where I've had them, and maybe add a vertical element to this. I could use 1 or 2 pieces. I might try it with 2. Then I've got this one here and my text there. This was a graphic from the publicity material. And if I want to reinforce this, which I have done in the journal that I showed you, I need that space there. So it shouldn't go too close to that edge there. Then I've got this strip, and I don't really want the name of the organisation on there, so this bird will fit nicely on top. And I don't want to cover the page too much because I like to add stitching to this. and I need to leave room for that without it getting too crowded. So it may be that I'll stitch something plant-like in this area here, and that way it adds texture and visual interest to the book page. And I think I'm happy with that. So we might try another layout on the eco-printed paper. I don't know about you, but I find that my table gets quite messy when I start doing something like this. I have little piles of scraps everywhere, and outside the perimeter of the camera shot, there is a lot of stuff lying around. But hopefully I have everything that I need within reach. So because this is quite dark, I might use some of the torn sheet music that I've got left over on this to lighten it up a little bit. But again, I don't want to obscure my eco-printing too much. So I might turn it around that way. So again, I like to have some verticals and some horizontals. Sometimes I can even add the text from the bottom of the sheets that I've cut down, so you get a nice horizontal line there. And it's about having a balanced composition, but it's also about doing something that you like the look of. And this is where I like to encourage a sense of play, because you won't know about what might work unless you play with your bits and pieces and see what happens. So keeping your mind open to possibilities, really. Now, this was a piece that was left over from tearing out something else, and it actually is quite a nice shape, so I might put that there. And remember that I said I had an idea for the text in the letter, so I'll just get it out. So we've got all this text here, which is the information that they've sent me. I don't want to tear this bit here, so I might just tear this off, just roughly, because I want to save that. And then I can use strips of this vertically, either by having the text sideways or having the text this way up. I actually think the text sideways might work better. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to tear it. I know that some people, when they do this kind of work, they dab the edges with pigment to make them not disappear into the background, but just to make them not be so stark. But I actually think that I don't need to do that with this, and I don't generally do it. I let the white show. That might not be to your taste, so if you feel like you would like to colour the edges, that's fine. Everyone has their own tastes and ideas about this, so I'm not telling you anything that's a hard and fast rule. All I'm doing is trying to show you some possibilities. So that's still a bit uneven there to what I would like. And I've got these little pieces that I tear off. I keep them. Same with that. There is not a lot of material with this, so I don't want to waste anything. And you never know when it might come in handy. So I'm just tearing off a bit more off this side. And when I lay it down, I quite like how that looks. I'll trim that off later. I'll just let that sit for a minute. And then I've got this, one of these circular shapes. So there's one of a bird. And because it's not a full circle, if I tuck that in underneath, it will look like it is a full circle, just that you can't see it all. That is almost enough. Maybe I could add some text. So that might go there. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that one too. So that's 2 layouts done. And what I'll do is I'll glue them down and then I'll come back. Here is a page that has now been glued down, and I think that has some really good possibilities for adding some stitching. And this is the other one, and I really like them both. And if they come after each other, say in a journal, it's actually quite nice to have that positive negative effect as you're turning the pages. So you've got one that's a bit dark and then you've got one that's a bit light. So that can make a nice combination. The next thing I need to do is to trim off the little bits that are hanging over the edge. I've already trimmed this off where it was hanging over the edge and let it stop short a little bit. So I'll just use my little scissors, because this is teabag, and I'll just gently guide it along the edge, being careful not to cut the background paper, and then just snip them off. You could tear them too, of course, if you wanted something that looks a bit more grungy, but for the purposes of this one, I'll do it with scissors. And by turning it over to do it, you've got that nice straight edge there to guide you when you cut it. Whereas if you did it from the other side, you wouldn't be able to see it. There we go. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I have added a bit of teabag to this one, just to keep it consistent, I think, but it also adds a nice bit of layering to the overall look. And I tore a piece off this side before I stuck it down, and then I thought, oh, well, I might also stick down that torn off piece. So I did that as well. The only thing I haven't done is glued the text down, which I was going to do there. So I'll just get my bit of baking paper, which makes a great background for gluing because it dries and then it's not sticky, so you can keep reusing it. So there we go. I'll just glue that down, crossing over between those two collaged pieces. And I'm just doing that with my finger, but sometimes what I do also is I use some of this baking paper and I use that to actually smooth it down, because it doesn't stick if there is glue leaking out of the edges. The next thing I'm going to do is to choose the coloured threads that I'd like to use for this project. When I did my wetlands journal, I stuck to about 4 different thread colours, and my favourites were these flower threads. They're a single strand of embroidery thread, and I really like using them. And I tended to use a bit of red because I think red is kind of like an alert signal. For example, if you come to a red light, you know you have to stop. And I used red quite a lot in the other one, not too overwhelming, but just enough. And then because this is about nature, I think I might use a couple of greens. So I've got those 2 greens. And then I also have a kind of a gold ochre colour. So that's 4 threads already. Occasionally I like to use a different colour thread that contrasts with those, or that is thicker, or both. So in the last one I used some of this pearl cotton because it's a thicker thread. Not sure if I'll use that. I also have black and a golden brown, and I think a variegated orangey colour in this too. So I might decide on that later. But for now, I think those are the threads that I'd like to use. I've finished this page that I did the layout for. I have done some clips to show how to do these different stitches that I've used, and I'm going to put a link to that at the bottom of this video in the description. The video was going to be very long if I included it in this particular presentation. So if you just go to the link, if you're not sure how to do the stitches, I do demonstrate them in a separate video. And just to name the stitches, these are feather stitch. Then I've done fly stitch to represent bird footprints. I've done rays in straight stitch around the bird, and then I've used back stitch and chain stitch for the greenery around this image here. And I don't think I need to do any more. I think it's got enough on it now, and I will also be reinforcing the edge of the page if I end up using this for an art journal, which I think I probably will. The other page, I haven't done any stitching yet, but I have added something to it. What I've done is I've added a tab or a tag, and this was a piece of the bottom edge of some sheet music that I used on the other pages, the other two pages. And I folded it in half and glued it front and back, so you can see there. And then I put a cutout of words from the publicity material on top. I may end up doing some stitching there. I have done that in my other journal, the Wetlands journal, as well. So the next thing I want to show you is ways to present this work or to use it perhaps in a project. So if you remember the Wetlands journal, this one is one that I made with a slip knot binding, and it had quite a few pages, so it took me a while, and I also misjudged how much thread I would need, but I managed to add in some other threads and some beads, and I'm pretty happy with that. So it can be made into an art journal like this. What happens when you do this, of course, is that the back page is showing. And I don't mind that. I think there's an honesty in that people can see the back of my stitching as well as the more public or so-called correct side. So I've deliberately done that, and I've done that in another journal as well, the one I showed you at the beginning. But if you don't want to do that, you can actually stick two pages together. So you could put these back to back like that, and that way you've got a double-sided page. That means you would have to stitch this other one as well before you did that. But once you've done all the stitching on both pages, all you need is some glue and maybe some heavy books, and you've got a page that is looking good on both sides. Another journal that I've been working on is this one. I do a lot of eco printing and eco dyeing, so the cover of this one is eco dyed and printed. And I love using recycled materials, so I've used recycled brown paper packaging. And on this one, I did want to be able to see both sides of the finished pages. So what I did was, I did everything on this piece of text paper before I attached it to the page in the journal. So all the machine stitching is actually just on that layer. The same with the tea bag. I made this and stitched that on, and then I glued the week that I was doing. A bit later on, I used some very thick cardboard, and I couldn't sew through it because it was too thick, so I just used double-sided tape. But all the pages were done separately before they were attached to the brown paper page. I've got one here that I've just completed, and you'll see when I turn the page over, I've done all the machine stitching already. I haven't done the week 19 label yet, and I haven't attached this yet. But this will be attached with double-sided tape, and then I'll glue the week that it is onto the background. And then, once I've done that, then I'll put double-sided tape on here and stick it to this page. So that is another way you could do it. You could have a blank journal that you've either made or purchased, do everything you want to a separate sheet of paper, let's say it was this one, and then adhere it to the page. So that works really well if you don't want to see the back. If you're particularly happy with something that you've made, it may end up being something that's an artwork in its own right. So if I put this page that I've just finished inside this mount and see what it looks like, it could possibly become something like that. So there's a backing piece and the frame, and they're made out of mount board, and I ordered this online, but you could make your own if you felt confident enough to cut with a scalpel and so on to get the shapes. I found it was just as easy to actually buy them and not worry about it. But I actually quite like that as an artwork. It works really well. And so this could be an option. If I try the other one in it, even without the stitching, let's see how that looks. That one doesn't work quite so well. But you can just try it and see what you think of your work when you finished it. So there are a few options for you to try, and I hope that's given you some ideas. Once again, thanks so much for joining me with this video. Please like and subscribe to Kelly's channel. She's got some wonderful videos and she puts them out every week, and they're so inspiring and I can highly recommend it. I really enjoy doing my creative work, and I hope that this has helped you with yours too.